Working? Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm very pleased to be chairing this debate because we have a really fundamental subject which mobilizes people and addresses the timeless question of finance. And we have two very different examples, which I hope will give you a lot of ideas because they know a lot about crowdfunding. One of them, Mathieu, whom I will present while Mostafa goes to get a headset. He's found it. I'll briefly present Mathieu. He belongs to a crowdfunding company which has been very successful, especially in France, and it's called Ulule. And Ulule, it was called that because of the owl on the logo. And it's doing very well. It's buying up other crowdfunding sites because there is a need. We know that the loans given out by banks are very difficult to obtain in the current difficult economic circumstances, whether it's for the press or for the media or for any other use. Access to funding is very tricky, and so Ulule, like other platforms for collective and participatory funding, is doing very well, and yet this is something which was being mocked 3 years ago. And even very serious people, the Authority of Market Supervision, the Commission of Banks, all these people are thinking about this new mode of financing and how to integrate it into the so-called normal economy. Now, to my right, we have Mostafa, whom some of you have met yesterday because he talked to you about the website which he contributes to in Egypt, and he has a very different experience. He is in a country which is still undergoing a revolution with a very activist model of crowdfunding, and yet which has been successful, and he will explain how. Let's start with Mathieu. Mathieu, please could you tell us briefly about Ulule and in particular, in the French media scene, how it is integrated and how it has contributed to saving projects. Ulule was created in 2010. We're about 2.5 years old, and so this allows us to give you a few figures today. It's about 7.5 million euros, which were collected across 2,300 projects, and we are available in 6 languages: French, Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, Italian, German, and we are now very present in Europe in the domain of crowdfunding. I am a journalist by training, and I have been in charge of digital aspects for the magazine called Maire in France, and the directors of Ulule also come from a media background and have been responsible for quite important projects in France. Initially, it was mostly the cultural environment which came to bring its finance, photography, cinema, and so on. And then, little by little, we started to see more media subjects. We started having journalists coming to finance reports, photo reports, books on information, and so on, and books on news. And towards the end of 2012, we started having more and more pure journalistic projects read by press businesses. A certain number of magazines and websites have come to look for financing using our platform, sometimes very successfully. And Laurent, whom I think you saw here, who launched in September a magazine called Cinema, or Cine, which managed to obtain several thousand euros to launch itself, and which is quite a large sum for the French market. And we are mostly financing press brands or internet sites which are not within the conventional economy of the media in France. And so they will come to us for financing, and what they will try to do is to then address themselves directly to the public and looking to us for alternative financing. Right, so in your website, you've been able to publish the most extraordinary stories of crowdfunding, and perhaps you could remind us of a few of them to explain in what way it has become very mainstream now to use the internet to carry out crowdfunding. Well, first of all, in terms of figures, the fact we are about nearly 2,400 projects which we finance, so that represents a significant number of projects financed. And then in terms of in France, we're becoming fairly mainstream. We're the first project to go beyond 400,000 euros collected in the space of a few months. It's a project which is a film project for a feature film. Which launches a series on the internet and which has been very successful in France, and so it has managed to raise over 400,000 euros in the space of 1.5 months. It's an alternative project, a project to finance a feature film outside of all the conventional channels for financing feature films in France, and it is the first project in France, and I would say even in Europe, which has gone beyond 400,000 euros. So you can see that we have very large sums engaged. We have projects in English which are targeting the English-speaking world, and so of course this gives a huge potential. But here, this is very much a French project for French people, and of course we propose several languages because sometimes we are interested in projects which have a more international vocation. But this particular one was specifically French, and it's interesting to see that even on this very specific case, we've managed to raise this amount of money. We had over 8,000 people who came together to finance this. Do you have an idea of the average level of support of the average project? Well, it's about 5,000 euros for the average project, so it's generally they're small-scale projects. It's also the case of small starters, despite projects which have gone beyond $1 million for the platform. In average, it's about $7,000, so it's fairly close to our kind of budget. And so these are small projects which tend to be financed, and on average, people give 50 euros through the platforms. And I think, again, that's about average, whatever the platform online. We are the main one in Europe today, even if there are some in other countries. There's one which is in Spain, another one in Germany, which are both successful, and there's also another one which Mostafa was using with Mosireen, and others again. And regarding specifically media projects, do you have a particular subsidiary or line, for example, for everything regarding photography and information? And do you treat them differently within Ulule? What are the main characteristics? No, we don't have any sort of sub-website specifically for that. At Ulule, we wanted to initially be open to all types of projects. That's not the case of other platforms. Some of them are very specifically targeted towards music or cinema, for example, but we are mostly targeted towards creative projects in a very wide sense, but we're not necessarily going to go into more sort of political subjects. Sorry, the other websites will not necessarily finance political websites. Our idea was very much to fund any kind of creative project. So journalism is part of that in parallel with other kinds of projects. So from a journalism point of view, what are the main profiles of projects? Documentaries, maybe? Yes, so documentaries are often financed by us. In France, we are very interested in this. We are trying to balance the paper media and digital media. And so we are doing two things in parallel. We have webzines, so online magazines, who in fact are now wanting to go towards paper, and we're trying to financing paper versions. So we have a fanzine in France, which is a fairly important cultural magazine, which has just managed to finance the first 3 editions of its paper version. So they obtained about 7,000 and 10,000 euros per edition, which they managed to finance from 3 different sources. And we've also had paper newspapers or paper magazines who wanted to finance a website. So do you have also radio projects or maybe other internet projects? Yes, we have very sort of internet-based projects, but radio projects, no, not really. Nothing specifically Although, actually, sorry, we have one project for HDR, which is a local radio for the west of France, and they have come to us to finance their activities. And we have many projects which are very close to radio, but radio broadcast on internet. We had initially many amateurs who had a very geeky broadcasts addressing or wanting to appeal to a very specific market. But actually this is now becoming more and more significant because it's beginning to represent a lot of people in France. The French public is now very much on the lookout for podcasts. So do you finance podcasts? Yes, yeah, we have one, for example, called Geekin, which is currently being financed. Two things. We have a legal problem because in France and in Western Europe and in the USA, we have quite straightforward financing. We can use Moneybooker or PayPal. Sending money is fairly easy. People know how it works and are used to it, and it's fairly safe and secure. But that's not the case everywhere. But what is the legal framework of this new economy? Because, of course, this is what it is. And then I will ask you the next question. The big problem for the media is that it's financed one shot at a time. So you finance one edition each time. But what about making it sustainable? So from a legal point of view, we don't really have any problems. Crowdfunding is a very wide term now. There are different kinds of gifts. So that we have fundraising, and then we have crowdfunding. So people come together to support a project by giving money, and then they will usually get some kind of a physical counterpart. And then we have all the crowdfunding where there is a financial return or a participation of a company. So, for example, you will finance an artist and you will receive income, if ever, or returns if it is successful, or you will help to finance a company, and in exchange you will receive some proportion of their profits. In France and in all northern countries, we also have many models of this kind of thing. From a legal point of view, it's perceived as a commercial transaction. Someone has given 50 euros to a project and they will receive a DVD in exchange for their contribution. That's seen as a commercial transaction. In many ways, it's seen as though he has bought that DVD. But if someone gives 100 euros and then they will get 0.1%, for example, of the benefits of that company, that now is very complex because it is not well defined. Today in France, it's limited to 150 people who are allowed to contribute to this kind of project. So, of course, that is quite a constraint in terms of the numbers of people who can contribute to a project. And within the context of the economic and banking crisis, do you think that there will be measures taken to encourage this? Well, what we foresee is a huge advance in the years to come. Potentially, this could be quite explosive, but for the moment, legally speaking, it is quite tricky. Of course, lots of people are beginning to take an interest in it, but at some point they're going to need to actually draw up some laws. In the USA, this is making progress, and in France, the President talked about it, and Benoît Hamon has started to talk about this, and people who are responsible for the digital development are also talking about it. But at the moment, it's saying it's just at the level of a lot of words and not many actions. And the reward base is also a concept which should be quite promising. And so we know that we can finance a web documentary or finance a film or a video game. This has been very successful for some projects, but the question is then how to make it sustainable when you have a radio station, when you have employees, when you have outgoings. So have you got ideas for sustainability? Well, I'm sure the ideas will come. For example, the Bonsai magazine is their third edition. They've managed to finance these 3 different editions using this subscription mode. But the thing is, they already have a community which is widening, so that will provide the sustainable support base. And of course, the crowdfunding is also a way of actually building up a community which will then allow you to be sustainable. Now then, crowdfunding, of course, is not an economic model. It is only one source of financing among others. Newspapers today are not going to be 100% financed by crowdfunding. Crowdfunding works because it finances a project in a short-term manner. And a project is something which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We come to finance a web documentary or come to finance one edition of a magazine, but we're not going to finance an annual budget or overheads. But if people say, well, this is crazy because... but in fact... No, this has worked, and Mostafa will be able to talk to you about his project, and he was able to finance it for a whole year. But it is also quite complex. People will respond because but they've heard about a project and they're going to respond in a kind of urgent way. And the idea is that the project organizers ask for a particular sum of money, and if that sum isn't achieved, they won't be able to run their project, and that mobilizes people to contribute. So 70% of the projects who pass through us succeed, and generally 50% of projects manage to actually get together the required sum for the project to go ahead. Yes, indeed. So the idea is that you have a certain number of days during which you can accumulate the funding necessary. And so even if you don't reach the total sum, you will nevertheless be entitled to the sum which has been collected up until the end date. What then happens, though, in the different legal framework, in France, if the total sum isn't met, then the people who have contributed will be refunded. It is very important, we believe, to have this end date and this time pressure, because that is what encourages people to get behind a project, because there's a sense of urgency instilled by this. Thank you very much, Mostafa. Now, this is another world, and yet this is still crowdfunding, which is a very wide term, as Mathieu has said, in a very specific context with very active young people, very skilled, very energetic, even after 2 years of revolution. And he is going to explain to us his story. Some of you have seen his presentation yesterday afternoon and so have an idea of what it's all about. But it would also be interesting to see this in a completely different context. And as an introduction, I will explain that the big problem of crowdfunding after the Arab Revolution, as elsewhere in the world, crowdfunding is something which is inspiring people everywhere, except perhaps in Asia, where it's seen as rather illegal. But the problem is that electronic payment means like PayPal, well, you can't. You're fairly limited as to the countries which you're allowed to send money from or to. For example, if you wanted to send $2,000 from Mali through PayPal, you can do that, but you wouldn't be able to receive it. So there are also banking issues, which mean that in some countries it won't be practicable. So it is very difficult to imagine a project like Ulule in some countries, because you wouldn't have PayPal, you'd only have postal orders, you wouldn't have internet communication. And yet we can say that, in fact, there are systems which have existed for a long time, and also in the Arab world, where there's a cultural habit of lending against some kind of promise of return. In fact, it is a very ancient and traditional practice. There are two main examples. For example, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona and the Statue of Liberty in New York. They were funded by popular subscriptions. But to come back to payments, the payment is done mostly with a bank card, with a credit card. We use PayPal for a certain number of projects across the world. To give you an idea, Ulule has projects from 50 countries across the world, and the contributors come from 140 countries across the world. So this affects the entire world. But, for example, for the carriers of the projects, they find it difficult to accept projects coming from Africa, be it North Africa or the rest of Africa, precisely because of this payment problem. Banks who refuse to process payments to or from those countries. So we haven't really found an efficient solution for that. We have many people who come from Tunisia and Morocco with ideas, or Togo. We have a lot of projects in Togo at the moment, and people have to find people who has someone with a European bank account in order for the project to be accepted.
Et bon, et Mostafa, lui, l'argent justement, il va vous le dire pourquoi.
Now Mostafa is going to tell us why it's not a problem, and despite that they managed to finance quite a few projects.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's like you said, crowdfunding as a concept, it's not new. Like the Statue of Liberty, another famous statue in Egypt called the Renaissance of Egypt, which was built in the 1920s, was built by popular support. I mean, crowdfunding. And until today, there are many ways in which people just tip in a little bit of money to get somebody one thing, get somebody a fridge, or get somebody something else. And we have something which we call a jam'iyya, which is it exists outside the banking system. It's when 20 people decide to enter together in a cycle in which every month each person will pay something like £10, and then each month one of them will get £1,000 because of this. So it's not new. It's not. What we're seeing now is the appropriate online tools to make it happen on a bigger on a bigger basis. But we believe it has existed. At Mosireen we collect individual donations only, and
It would be useful. Il serait utile peut-être de rappeler.
Maybe it would be useful to say a few words about what Mosireen is and how it was created, for those of you who were not here yesterday.
Mosireen is a media collective, and it's a collective because it's non-hierarchical, it's completely circular, and we work on consensus. We're 17 to 18 people, and we work in a network of 100 activists. And a group of us got together after the start of the revolution in 2011 because we felt we need to put our efforts together to counter the propaganda, the state propaganda, and the mainstream media propaganda. And we have a lot of activities. We publish videos, and we host an archive of citizen media, and we do workshops. And we don't accept institutional funding, governmental funding, organizational funding, or corporate funding. We only accept individual donations. And for us, crowdfunding is the natural way to get supported, because we don't want. I mean, part of the reason is that we don't want to get influenced by other organizations or governments or whatever. But also, I believe that traditional media, because it's top-bottom funded, its editorial policy is also top-bottom. It comes from above, and then it's like everybody was saying yesterday. The editorial desk is asking journalists to film this and not that. We don't work this way. We work bottom. And we believe we're a part of a struggling community, and we believe that this struggling community should have an interest in our existence, and it should support us to continue to exist. And we believe also, that we should work together in collaboration with activists from all around the world, who are the people who funded us. Because at the time we did the Indiegogo campaign, it was not possible for Egyptians to pay.
Let's go arrivons à ce moment.
So let's come to this moment. How did you start your participatory funding campaign for your project? How did it happen?
Okay, so well, first of all, I just want to say that we take donations all year. We have donation boxes in all of our activities, and we decided, because we needed to go to a new space, we decided that we're going to launch a crowdfunding campaign, and we had a long discussion about what we can offer, what we can do, how much we want, and we budgeted. And again, this is a big difference between big media organizations and us. Our whole budget for the year is $40,000. Which
1 year, $40,000.
Yes. So, I mean, say this to any English language newspaper in Egypt, which are smaller than the Arabic language newspapers in Egypt, and they think you're crazy. It's a very small budget. But we decided we really wanted it to be this number, and we want to only count on the crowdfunding campaign for it. We discussed what we can offer, and we decided that we cannot really offer anyone anything, because we don't want to give an advantage to those who pay over those who don't pay. And we don't want to, we believe it is the duty of people to support this kind of effort. And because all of us work on volunteer basis, with the exception of 2, but all of the others work on volunteer basis. So we believe it is our duty to do this work, but it's also other people's duty to support us to do this work. And if the international community, the activists, the people who have seen our videos, people who have seen our work and want to support us to continue to exist, feel that we're important, that should be enough. So if you look at our Indiegogo, what you get, we've thought a lot about the perk system of these crowdfunding websites. Sorry, Mathieu. And we realized that you're not going to support us so that you can get a Mosireen t-shirt or a mug. If you're going to support us, it's going to be for the work. It's going to be because you consider yourself part of the global community pushing for change. So we don't offer any perks. We have, I think our donation numbers were from, sorry, could you scroll up just a little bit? Our donation numbers, is from $20 to 1,000, and 1,000 is the maximum donation we accept from anyone.
Because you don't want people taking too much power, right?
Yes, we don't. I mean, it really comes down to, if I was saying this yesterday, if somebody gives you $10,000 and then they say, oh, my son or my daughter wants to learn filmmaking, why don't you take him on board? And I mean, it really comes down to the little. We don't want any little requests to deal with. So nobody can ever give us anything more than $1,000. Basically, we started it up. It was not. It took a while. We realized in the first 5-6 days that we really needed to push it. So we started sending people personal messages because a few of us are filmmakers. They've been to festivals, documentary film festivals, and we operate in these networks. We started Facebooking everyone, and we really felt that involving people personally in your issue makes all the difference. There is a word in Arabic which is called yuwarratu, which I don't know how to translate this. Any helpers? Yuwarratu means to make somebody an accomplice in your crime. So when you talk to people and you make them really personally invested in what you're fighting for, and so for the next 10 days, 15 days, we decided to involve as many people as possible, people who we know are interested to know about Egypt, people who, but they don't feel yet as part of the crime, so we try to involve them. And then we got to a filmmaker who knows the Pirate Bay group. He also crowdfunded for his film, and he introduced us to the Pirate Bay, the Pirate Bay, the torrent website. And then the Pirate Bay put our support banner, Support Mosireen, on their website for 24 hours. And I mean, I don't know if you know this, but the Pirate Bay is the world's largest distributor. It has all the films, all the music, and it has 5 million visits a day. So that immediately, for 24 hours, that topped. I think that exceeded our crowdfunding by $10,000. And it really brought us in a different sphere. Then Indiegogo put us on the homepage. I mean, and then people started paying more, and we got the money.
C'était pendant l'année de la Révolution, et donc c'est.
That was during the year of the revolution, and I can imagine that most of your contributors would be abroad back then because they could send money electronically.
Et localement?
And locals also?
Well, of course, there is a big Egyptian and Arab community abroad who can use it. At that time, PayPal did not work in Egypt. PayPal just started working in Egypt last month. So at that time, the people who pay are either Egyptians living abroad, Arabs living abroad, or international activists or people who are interested in paying. Locally, what we do, I'm sorry, Noor, can you go back to the Indiegogo page and scroll down? I want to show you the box that we have. Sorry, scroll up. Yeah, that's the box. Okay, so we have these boxes everywhere. We have these wooden boxes, glass, and locally, this is how we get fundraised, how we get donations. All of the activities we do, because we do screenings, we do workshops, we have editing equipment, we have filming equipment, and all of them are on a suggested fee basis. So if you can't afford it, you don't have to pay. If you you know, if you can afford it, we suggest a fee for you, say, you know, £100, so like 18 euros for using the editing for 1 day. If you want to pay more, you're welcome to pay more. But we don't go around requesting you, telling you, oh, we suggest that you pay this. No, but we put these boxes usually outside, next to the door, and we say it's up to you to pay what you can.
Une précision. Vous faites.
Just one thing. Those boxes move from one place to another, right? And you just put them wherever you have training or screenings or whatever. So what do you do to actually raise money locally?
I mean, because we have, this is what we do to raise the money locally. We did one gala, I don't know what to call it other than that. We did one, performance for rich upper class people in Egypt so that they can support us, but also to communicate with them so that if anything happens to us, we're very well connected, so we can't be harmed. So we did one party, and that party we raised quite a bit of money from the Egyptian community, but most of the time we just do this, and this really works because I can tell you for the workshops, our suggested fee for the workshops is about £50, which is €8, and it's a 3-day workshop. So a lot of the people actually pay more because if they take this workshop anywhere else, it would be £1,000. So a lot of the people pay us £500, £400, and this actually pays for the expenses.
And you covered the
And how many dollars did you get for the first year? Because your budget is annual based. You have a budget for one given year.
Well, the $40,000 is our annual budget. We raised locally approximately $20,000 as well, so we were covered. The first year we didn't count because the first year there was no money. We did the work anyway, and somebody gave us the space, and now we paid them the money from the money we raised. Somebody gave us the office, and some people donated their IMAX and equipment. We were going to start an indie media Cairo, and once we said this, a lot of the other indie medias gave us money to buy cameras. And then that kind of withered away because indie media is not very popular anymore. It's not very watched anymore. So we took the cameras and put them in Mosireen. So 5 of the cameras are actually donations from indie media. And so all of these things got together. So the first year we did not count. For this budget, it's supposed to be the 2013 budget, but we haven't even started spending it. So we've been working for the past half year from the local donations, and this budget now we decided that it's going to be from July 2013 to July 2014, and it's really the annual budget for all of our activities.
Okay, so pardon.
So you said that you didn't want to raise money for yourselves anymore, but you wanted to have a middleman for other projects. Now, are you going to start your new platform of crowdfunding?
No, we're not interested in that. We can very much use. We got an offer now from Mathieu. He said he'll put us on the homepage for 1 week, and so we're considering using Ulule. No, he didn't. But no. The idea that we have is that now that we're well situated, and because we want to continue working as a collective and as predominantly as volunteers, we don't want to do this effort every year. We don't want to, July 2014 again, to sit and say, okay, we want to do this, and start sending people the same messages. So what we want to do is actually to downsize our activities, and because we already did workshops around Egyptian cities, and I imagine in the next year we'll do another round of workshops around more Egyptian cities, and in all of these cities, we encourage the participants in these workshops to start their media collectives as well. So what we're hoping to do is that we'll actually downsize our activities and also downsize our budget even more. And if people want to fund us or want to give us money, then we'll direct them at the other initiatives we know that need money. I know a space called Sandara in Alexandria, for example. They were having financial hardships and they were doing amazing work. So for a week or 2 weeks, we directed all of our funding to them. I think it was actually for 10 days. We directed our funding to them so that they can cover the rent and they can cover stuff. So and we're not interested in Mosireen becoming this giant the Coca-Cola of citizen journalism, citizen media. We're actually interested in having different things. A lot of the times, the other workshops, they tell us, why don't we have a Mansoura Mosireen or an Alexandria Mosireen, and we say we're not interested in that. We don't want to deal, we don't want to have the responsibility, but we also don't want Mosireen to be a center. I mean, everything in Egypt is centralized, so we don't want.
C'est intéressant peut-être de dire avant de passer.
Yes, before we move on to the Q&A session, I think it would be important to say that those people gathering money do not want to be work in associations with other countries or cannot set up associations in the Maghreb or in Egypt or in other countries, because legally being recognized, it's a great danger. Recently there were trials for NGOs based in Egypt and even in Morocco also, and it's yet another hurdle. It's just for your information, but because having an association, being set up as an association, means you can be in the line of fire, really, and so you have to be very careful.
Sorry, I just want to clarify really quickly. It's not really the danger for us, but because there is no legal framework that allows us to do what we want to do. So any way we do it, it's going to be illegal. So we decided not to bother with it.
Beaucoup de questions, beaucoup. Alors, je vais commencer par monsieur.
Oui, bonjour.
Hugo Guimet, I work at the Progrès newspaper in Lyon, in France. I had a question for Mathieu. Can I offer a project simultaneously on several platforms at the same time, or is it exclusive contracts whenever I have a project on a given platform? There is no exclusive contract as such. I mean, most platforms would recommend against it. And indeed, it wouldn't make much sense to have a project on several platforms. And if that were to be the case, people feel like they would be reaching more people and getting more money, but it actually weakens their ability to collect money, because the idea is to send as many people as possible on one page on the internet and to turn those visitors into supporters, financial supporters. But if you start sending people from your network, following you on Facebook, etc., if you send them to 3 or 4 different places for money fundraising, then you're going to be losing them more than uniting them. So you need to focus yourself on one single site. Actually, I think it works much better. So it's not that we don't want to do it, or legally we're not allowed to do it, but it's just that we recommend people don't do it. We say, well, focus on your point of collection rather than developing another one. Benjamin, I'm a student at the journalism school in Montpellier. Now, in the press industry, the limit of crowdfunding isn't that the duration, quite simply. In other words, if you want to develop a punctual project, then you can develop it as long as you know what you want to do. But if you want to do something in the long run, isn't there a risk of conflicts of interest, or isn't there a risk of actually closing your eyes on where the money actually comes from, or being too close to some contributors, etc.? Isn't that the risk for a given project if you want to work on the long term? I think your question is a bit confused between two things. Yes, a project is crowdfunding, so it's easier to finance something punctually at a given point in time, rather than asking for a regular budget and with wages, etc. Now, in terms of conflicts of interest, I mean, I think this is a crowdfunding per se, and indeed there might be brands, companies, corporations that might want to step in and give money, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be a majority, so you're going to have money coming from different people. It's just like when you sell something to different subscribers. So I don't know whether for Mostafa it's the same thing. Maybe for Mosireen the things are quite different. I mean, they had money coming from institutions, corporations, etc. But indeed, the relationship to the institution might be more complicated for them than it is for French media.
Well, I think it's really a point of I don't think that if you're working with an institution or funding that you as a journalist are distant from, that your editorial boss is distant from, or the business department is distant from. And there are a million cases in mainstream media and journalism. The famous is the tobacco industry whistleblower in the U.S. The famous, it's countless. And I think actually it's best to be honest to yourself and know who is your community and who has an invested interest in your work, in what you report, and who you should account for. Because they are the ones that you should be benefiting. They're the ones that should be, that your media should play a role in their, struggle, their issues and whatever. And they're the ones you should account for. And I don't think this is necessarily bad, being close to the community that supports you, as long as it's not, two people who are paying everything. I think the ideal situation for Mosireen, and I always say this, is 1 million people each paying $50 or something like this, because this is really, because then you have wide viewership, and then you understand that these people are involved in your work, and your work benefits them.
Une autre question au centre, je ne sais pas où est le micro. Voilà. Ah, d'accord, parce qu'il y en a un autre qui circule là.
Merci. Ayman Mana du Liban.
I come from Lebanon. How can you assess crowdfunding experiences when it comes to investigation journalism with our very detailed subjects not covered by the traditional media, and when citizens believe they need extra information? Now, the budgets for such investigation might take time and might be presented very clearly, and then you ask people for their contribution. Now, there are such projects which might be started. Journalists might say, well, I would like to have an investigation on this and that, and my investigation is going to cost so many thousand euros, and I need I need money to actually fund it. So there are such projects that can be financed. The problem is to repeat that in the duration. And at the end of the day, you need to have at least a media brand or something that will actually support those projects and help launch them. What do you mean by media brand? Well, by media brand, I mean a media part, Rue 89, Le Figaro, whatever. It can be any big media newspaper, a media that can actually echo that and support it, because we provide funding. So if tomorrow a journalist here says, well, I would like to have an investigation on this or that, we need a platform. They come to our platform, they find the money, and they can actually develop, do their work. Then that's going to be a first thing. Then there might be a community around that expecting waiting for the investigation, but it doesn't necessarily give them visibility for their work. And the visibility for their work, that's another step. And either you have a great community out there that can actually disseminate it, talk about it in the social networks, etc., in a very scattered way, as is the case on the internet these days, or you have a large media corporation associated, and that gives it high visibility. It can be one media or several media, by the way, because, of course, with multi-links or other things, some topics might be supported by several media corporations across the world. And so you need to have this visibility. So it's two different topics, really, but crowdfunding can help provide you more visibility in some issues. So one more last question. I had a question for both of you. Are there such things as selection criteria for sources that want to fund projects? And can these sources have a say on the contents? And recently we saw that there were so many money laundering networks. How can you avoid these? For us, in any case, we're quite widely open. We're open to private individuals, corporations. We will carry out specific checks, having a bank account, ID. If it is an association, we need the bylaws of the association, and because in France it needs to be registered, etc. And so we can do all those checks. As far as the origin of the funds are concerned, there might be alarms if there is too much money coming to a project suddenly. For the time being, it's never happened, to be honest. I think that the record given by one person was 6,000 euros. Well, if that's the case, then there will be cross-checks and double checks and all the rest of it to see where the funds come from. And then most of the money is a small small donations. In terms of money laundering, the thing is that we can't. Sometimes project holders say, well, we want to give 100 euro. I was given 50 euros, 100 euros. Can you give that? No, we can't, because we can't take cash. We can't take cash because of money laundering problems, and we have to be able to trace the origin of the funds. And because when it comes through PayPal or Visa, and we have a transaction system which is quite tricky, complicated, we have a service provider with a bank agreement, etc. So it's normally we should be protected.
I don't know about money laundering, but in terms of influence, I mean, we only accept from individual donors, and even if someone has intentions or whatever, and but the power of the rest of the community makes it balances everybody's intentions out. So we are not accountable for people's. I mean, we're accountable for the struggle. We're accountable for our local community, but we're not accountable for the personal requests of the donors. We don't accept in Mosireen. We don't accept any donations from any Israeli institution or organization, because we're BDS. We believe in boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the Zionist state, and so this is our number one. No, definitely not. Apart from that, if you work for the UN, if you work for whatever, but you give us an individual donation, we don't mind. I mean, that's
Mais pour compléter, pour bien comprendre sur les plateformes.
Yes, just one thing I would like to add. I mean, for us, for the project holder, there might be thousands of people giving him money. I mean, but he's still in charge of his project and the rights of his project. I mean, we're talking about if it's in the press, in the music, in the cinema, there might be moral rights generated because of the dissemination of works. Just because hundreds of people were involved, it doesn't mean that they have any right on whatever you produce. The only right they have is that they paid 20 euros, and for 20 euros you said, well, you will get that in return, then you have to give that in return, but they have no right on the project itself. They can criticize you if they hate Mosireen, and if they think that Mosireen is not doing the right job and not doing what they were supposed to do, then why not? But I mean, that's just a normal relationship. As journalists, we'll know that, and people expect something from us, but I mean, they have no right on the project itself. And so whenever the number of contributors, whatever the amounts of money, you do whatever you want to do, except that you have to deliver the project you were supposed to deliver.
1, 2, 3. On va conclure là-dessus en vous remerciant, et je précise comme à chaque fois.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are more questions because it's a very exciting topic, but of course you can continue asking your questions and talking over the coffee or tea break. And that's really one of the advantages of this symposium, is that we can exchange over the breaks, of course, and do some networking. So thank you very much anyway, because it was really, really interesting. New perspective. It's just not just one solution.